Good morning. It is Sunday, September the 25th, 2022. The title of today's message is His Farm and His Workers. This is the third part in a series of messages and the final one for this particular theme. We'll be looking again at 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 5 through 9. Over the last few messages, we have focused on a theme of thinking about our church and the collective church as God's farm, and each of us as his workers serving in his fields. We will conclude, as I said, that theme today, but first, here's a quick review of what we have learned already. We've learned that our church is one of God's fields and part of a larger collective farm, the worldwide church. We've learned that God cultivates his ground, preparing it to be fertile and fruitful. He also protects that which is his, and he expects a harvest. 2 weeks ago, we were reminded that there is work on God's farm for each of us to do. There is also a division of labor, meaning not everyone is called to the same tasks. And despite our different callings, there should be among us a unity of purpose with the same outcome, the harvest in mind. Finally, we have also been reminded that on our own, we as workers amount to nothing. We must be co-laborers with God, and it is only in and through his divine protection and direction that the good seed, pure water, and perfect conditions needed for producing a great harvest are provided. God will also reward us according to our faithful efforts, regardless of the outcome, as we are not accountable for the results. Working together with him, we have been successful, and we are guaranteed to be successful in the future. This morning, I want to turn our attention to our cooperation with other churches, other fields, if you will, within God's farm, something I believe we also have been called to do. But first, let's read our focal scripture reference for this series of messages once more. Reading from 1 Corinthians chapter 3, beginning in verse 5. The Apostle Paul writing, "What then is Apollos? What is Paul? They are servants through whom you believed, and each has the role the Lord has given. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So then neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. Now he who plants," Paul wrote in verse 8, "and he who waters are one, and each will receive his own reward according to his own labor. For we are God's co-workers. You are God's field, God's building." I want to reframe the clear instruction of these verses this morning to focus, as I said a minute ago, on cooperation among churches. And I want to do it in this way. Let's substitute our church for Apollos and any other Bible-believing church for Paul, along with a few other minor adaptations. Now I want you to listen to the result. What is Fairacres Baptist Church? What is another church? Both are servants through whom people have come to believe, and each has the role the Lord has given. Fairacres planted, another church watered, but God gave the growth. So then, neither the church who plants or the church who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. Now the church who plants and the church who waters are one, and each will receive its own reward according to its own labor. For the churches are God's co-workers. They are God's fields, God's buildings. So why do we choose to cooperate with other churches? Through the Rio Grande Baptist Association, the Baptist Convention of New Mexico, the Southern Baptist Convention, or even perhaps directly with another church on our own? Well, first, it is because we recognize that different churches have different roles. If you look at Bible-believing churches across our city, state, nation, and our world, one thing will be clear. While there are certainly some similarities, there are also many differences. Some churches are large and some are small. Some are found in big cities and others in small towns. Some are more effective in reaching the young, others in ministering to seniors. Some worship in a contemporary style, while others in a more traditional style. And some churches reach those who speak English effectively, while others reach those who speak Spanish or Korean or some other language. Because our church on its own can't be and do all these things, we choose to cooperate with other churches so that through our differences, we can collectively contribute to God's harvest. Second, we know on our own, we are nothing. Considering what we just heard, imagine if it was our task as a church and ours alone to reach all the different people groups in our community with the gospel, and not just reach them, but be effective and impactful in doing so. It would be an impossible task for one church, any church, and we're talking about just one community, not a whole country or the entire world. On our own, we are incapable of reaching all who need to hear and respond to the gospel. So what can we do? We can choose to cooperate with other Bible-believing churches, even if we don't always agree on everything with them, agree with their methods or with their styles of worship, because we know we can't do everything. With that in mind, the third point this morning is together. We are more than we are alone. When we think of ourselves as churches, as different fields with different workers who are all part of God's collective farm, it is clear we need to work together for the success of each other and for all combined. This goes right along with what we have traditionally seen in farming communities all around this country. When one farmer needs assistance, his neighbor farmers provide that assistance. Whether it's raising a barn, helping with an irrigation, or getting a crop in before it rains, farmers help each other when asked and needed. Should we then, as a church, as a field in God's farm, be any different? When we are aware of a need, we as churches should come together to meet that need. And if we become aware of a need in another church that we can meet as an individual church, I believe we should do so. Finally, why must we be willing to work together? Because we belong to God. We often find ourselves thinking and talking about Fairacres Baptist Church as our church. But the truth is, this church is God's church, not ours. And it is his to do with as he sees fit. This church's land, buildings, furniture, equipment, finances, and its workers all belong to God. Our task then, as God's workers in this church, is to be good stewards of everything that he has provided. And we do so best when we acknowledge and act like we're just one part of a collective whole that shares a common purpose. Different churches have different roles. Churches other than ours will reach people we will never meet until we enter eternity. That reality underscores the fact that on our own, we can't reach everyone. On our own, we are nothing, but together we are more. And if we choose to work together with God and in line with his plan and purpose, we can accomplish infinitely more than we ever could on our own. So when it comes time to make our contribution to support the collective work of our sister churches, we should be willing and ready to do so. Whether that is through giving to a missions offering, making a quarterly contribution to our local association or state convention, or helping another church directly. We, as a church, are God's co-workers. We are His field, and we are His building. Let our collective actions now and in the future reflect this important truth. God bless you this week.